Hi folks, welcome back to the Chip Break series on machining, entrepreneurship, and shop operation topics. Thought it would be great to kick this series back off with this list that I've not only found really inspirational, but I like this list because it actually gives some really specific direction, both for operating your business in your shop and thinking about new products and new ventures. If you want to weigh in on other Chip Break topics that you'd like to see, click here for the card over to the NYC CNC page. We want your input on everything from shop operations to business basics, accounting, and entrepreneurship. So this list looks kind of discolored and worn because it has been by my desk since I first read it about 10 years ago. It was written by a fellow named Jay Goltz for a New York Times entrepreneurship column. And it was written as a response to, what do I need to know to succeed? Now, I really don't like most of these sort of inspirational lists. This one, though, is the exception. And let's walk through these 10 reasons and think about how they can help you and how they've helped us. Number one, look for opportunities to do something better than just about everyone else. So there's some subtle nuances in this sentence, but the number one thing is you've got to be good at what you do. You've got to be passionate about it, and you've got to have the ability to deliver that product with a knowledge base or a passion that's better than just about everyone else. You don't have to necessarily be the best. You've got to make sure that if you take a step back and take off those entrepreneurial blinders, what do people think about the product or service that you're delivering? Don't ask your family, your wife, or your friends about what they think of your new idea or your new product, because you're not going to get the feedback you want to see, not the feedback you're going to get when you actually launch a product or you deal with real customers. Number two, accept risk as a necessary evil. It makes for much less competition. Risk exists. You cannot isolate it. You cannot completely remove it. Business has risk. Stack the deck in your favor. It's one reason why we're a big fan of either no debt or absolutely minimal debt, because it completely shifts the risk in your favor. You're not worried about the bank. You don't work for the bank. You're not letting the bank profit off of your work. You're building your business in your own control. Nevertheless, there is risk. There's risk in the form of competition. There's risk in the form of executing on your product. Accept that as something that's going to happen and plan for it. One of the second products that I ever brought to market was a GoPro camera mount for Picatinny rails. We basically knew that we were going to get knocked off. We knew domestic and overseas folks were going to start ripping these off, either blatantly or variants of it. And in fact, the more successful you are, the more likely that's going to happen. Now, you can try to pursue things like patents and trademarks, but generally speaking, it's better to out-execute. But regardless, you have to accept that. Number three, act responsibly to employees, customers, and vendors. Now, this is an easy thing to say. It's a harder thing to do. If no one's looking, if no one knows what you're doing, are you still happy with the decision you've made? And I really mean it. This is a difficult thing to do. If you've machined a part and it's beautiful and there's no problem with it except that one little spot, what do? Do you ship it? Do you call the customer? Do you ship it and not tell the customer? Do you remake it from scratch? Do you call the customer and communicate with them and figure out if it's an acceptable thing that can either be fixed or reworked or left as is? Think about how you want to handle those situations before they occur. That way, when you're caught up in the heat of the moment, you're more likely going to fall back on the decision that you feel good about in the long term. It stinks to remake a part, but a day later, a week later, a month later, if you look back on it, I bet you will feel good about it. Similarly with your employees and your vendors. I've always believed it's a two-way street. Yes, sometimes it's a negotiation, but a lot of times you've got to realize a rising tide raises all ships. You're working with your vendors to help them make money so you can make money. Do we expect good pricing? Yes, but you don't need to browbeat them up. When you have a problem with a service like anodizing, try to dig into what that problem is rather than just say what so many folks seem to say, which is, we can't find any good anodizers. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs and the folks that I look up to have come up with creative solutions. Like in the anodizing example, let's come up with our own packaging, our own processes, our own setup sheets for internal and for our third-party vendors to help this become a win-win. Number four, I've got many favorites on this list. This is one of them. Goals aren't enough. You need a plan. You need to execute the plan. I hate goals. Goals are actually the byproduct of long-term, planned, deliberate success. Focus less on the goal. You can think about the goal and you can write it out there and as the long reach thing. It's between today and that goal that is what matters. That's the execution part. I'll give you an example. We're thinking about implementing an ERP system right here. That's a pretty lofty thing. There's a lot of work behind it. Saying that's the goal doesn't really help me. What helps me is to break that down into steps. So the first step today, in the next hour or by lunch, finish your list of the 10 software packages that you're considering. Make the notes of who you know is using them, what you've heard reputation-wise, what may be a good fit, and just finish that list. That's a mini goal that you can then say is done, and I've done it really well. That way, when you come back later to think more about it, you've got that grunt work done, and you can put on your critical thinking hat and make a better decision. It's also tying into the E-Myth Revisited, where it talks about a solopreneur. If you're just getting started out, you're gonna wear a lot of hats. You're gonna be the kind of grunt work person, you're gonna be kind of the shop manager, and you're gonna be the visionary entrepreneur. You've gotta balance all of those things. And it helps me a lot of times to do that grunt work, take a break, go do something else, then you can come back and review your own work with a different hat on. Regardless, when you think about laying out your goals, focus more on the steps that you're going to do to get there and less on the end goal. Number 5, you need to fix the plan as you go. Learn from your mistakes. Most people don't. That's what I love about this list, is there's so many subtleties in the language. I assure you they are deliberate. Part of succeeding in business is doing what others aren't willing to do. Many people are stubborn or they let their egos get in the way. I have committed this crime myself. Recognize the plan's going to change. It can be as drastic as recognizing you're in the wrong business. When we were first launching StrikeMark and we were building an auto reset rifle target, that was all that I wanted. That was my identity. I loved it. Ends up, we were really in the camera mount business because it was the camera mounts that we were using to film our targets. Those were in demand, those were successful. That's what we could deliver at a much better volume, better margins to really build the business. We as humans, number 1, fall in love with our ideas, and number 2, are often unwilling to cut bait or shut down a project because of the time you've invested into it. That's called a sunk cost. It does not matter how much time you have put into it. It matters whether that product remains a viable, good product or service to the customers. If it's not working, change your plan or be willing to shut it down. Number 6, do not reinvent the wheel. Learn from others, join a business group. We live in the absolute best time ever in the history of mankind to start a business. There are so many awesome resources and folks that are willing to help. You've got to take that step. And I view this very much as a natural filter to entrepreneurship, because someone that's not willing to hustle, to dig in, to research, to learn, isn't gonna make it. That being said, there are so many resources out there. It can be as simple as reading books on your own. If you're in the United States, we've got programs like SCORE. Many 2-year and 4-year colleges will have business advisory groups, professors who may be in the know on this stuff. Likewise, many chambers of commerce would be a good place to start. Calling any one of those places will likely lead you down the path to finding opportunities to meet with other business owners or join a business group. Absolutely do it. Entrepreneurship can be a really lonely thing, and it's a trait about leadership that I think is often underemphasized, which is that when you're leading, no one tells you what to do. So you've got to figure that out, and that is not always easy. Again, don't reinvent the wheel. We've even got a forum on the NYC CNC site where folks chime in, both sharing their stories, lessons learned, and asking advice. I love that. I never want to be too proud than to say I could use some help, or I could just use an outside perspective on this issue. Number 7, another one of my favorites. Make sure the math works. I know plenty of people who work hard and follow their passion, but the math doesn't work. If the math doesn't work, neither does the business. Luckily, this one is simple, but probably is the biggest downfall of most business startups. They simply don't have the ability to earn a profit. If you don't have the ability to earn a profit, you don't have a business. You have at best a hobby, at worst something that's going to really be a bad outcome if you start pouring money into it, or worse, go into debt. Likewise, building a competing product based solely on a better price is generally not a sound business plan. What you're really saying is that you have the skill sets and ability to out-execute and out-deliver somebody who's already an established market player, and do so solely on lower margins. That's not what successful entrepreneurs do. A former mentor of mine said something that will always resonate with me, which is that when you're doing financial projections, there's one thing that's true about those projections. They're going to be wrong. And I like that because it kind of takes the pressure off. Financial projections are just that. They're not going to be perfect. They're projections. But you need to think about revenue ranges, and you need to think about expenses. And the average person thinks they aren't, meaning most people overestimate revenue and they underestimate expenses. Now, you have a little bit more wiggle room the less fixed costs and the less overhead you have. It's another reason why the earlier you are in the business, the more emphatic I am that you avoid fixed obligations, things like debt. Number 8, make sure that every employee understands and works towards the mission. This is more relevant as your company grows, but I think it's an important point to tie back, even if you're a 1 or 2 man job shop, machine shop, which is what are you selling? Most of the time, when we do work as a job shop, what we're selling isn't just the part that gets machined and put in a box and delivered to a customer. It's the overall experience. It's how responsive were we on quoting? How was it just working with us, period? Did we communicate well? Did we package the product well? Did we anticipate any problems with the parts or get them feedback if they needed feedback on how the part was designed or the print or the drawing? These are very much dependent on the type of job shop work you're doing, but just keep that in mind that often the best way to differentiate yourself in the manufacturing world, it's not always cheaper, it's not always better precision or better service finishes, it's the full experience of working with a shop. And the best way to think about this, turn it around. Think about the vendors and the folks that you enjoy working with versus the ones that you don't. Think about that vendor where you pick up the phone or shoot an email and you know it's going to go well, you know they're going to help you, you know the result's going to go well, versus the one who's always late, always complaining, poor communication. Don't be that person, and make sure that culture is part of your shop as you grow. Number 9, there are going to be difficult times and you need to be resilient. Whining is a waste of time. Again, an easy bullet point to read, harder at one to embrace. There's going to be stress, there's going to be times where it's lonely, there's going to be difficult decisions to make. Whining does no good. There's no room for pity parties. The question that I struggle with is how do you handle it when you get into that mindset or when you really are struggling? The way I deal with it is I have a list of people, and the list changes, but it's the people that I look up to, the people who are positive, the people who have managed to figure things out, the people who seem to always have the answers. Once in a while, I'll actually pick up the phone and call them. Some of them I don't even know. What I usually am able to do is I take a deep breath and then I start to think, how would Joe or John or Steve handle this problem? What would they say if I called them up? In my opinion, tools and processes like that as an entrepreneur are incredibly important. It's one of the things I like about the podcast that I do with John Grimsmill. We try to give an accurate representation of what it's like as an entrepreneur, meaning it's not all successes, it's not all wins. There's really struggles, there's really difficult decisions. You can talk about them, you can ask about how you would problem solve those, but don't complain. Number 10, which is my favorite, there will be sacrifices. Work to find a balance so that you don't become a financially successful loser. It's not about the income, it's about the outcome. I'm incredibly grateful for what the trades have done. I found this passion 10 years ago, and we built this into a business where I had the chance to do something I truly love. To me, part of the American dream is that opportunity to build something, to work really hard. The way I was raised in my background, there just is no substitute for working hard. On the flip side, some of the people that I look up to and are successful have had that balance of also working smart and also recognizing it's okay to not work late every night. It's okay to not work every weekend. It's okay to go on vacation. And I think that's really important. I feel really grateful that I actually legitimately love what I do, and I'm happy to work whenever because I love it. But life's about more than that, and almost everyone will still eventually get burned out at some point. There's more to life. Even for somebody like me, there's more to life than hitting cycle start or programming a CAM part. Keep that in mind as your long-term goal. What are you doing this all for? Folks, I hope you learned something. I hope you found this, again, not just inspirational, but the ability to give you some direction as you're moving forward in any sort of a business or entrepreneurial endeavor. Take care. See you soon.